Episode 1 of Parasite. The Gray begins with a big question about the population decreasing. If it could be dropped in half, would the environment and our impact on the planet diminish? And is this guy Thanos? The answer is no to the latter. It's actually the sporadic thoughts about humanity, as a whole bunch of strange alien spheres drop from the sky to the ground. We then cut to a rave, where a woman is up throwing EDM music out to a crowd full of people. One of these orbs finds its way onto the balcony and it opens up, revealing a strange gray parasite inside. It heads backstage and infects the DJ's brother sitting on the side. It enters his ear and controls his movements. Once it gains control, this alien turns the rave into a bloodbath, bursting out the guy's head and turning him into a tentacled creature, killing everyone in sight. We then get a look at our protagonist of the show sometime in the future, Sue-in. She works behind the counter at a checkout, and after a rude customer reprimands her, he ends up following her home. In fact, he smashes straight into her bike and then proceeds to stab her constantly with a knife. Sue-in tries to stumble away, but she passes out on the ground. As she does, another of those spheres drops just next to where Sue-in is. And as this crazy murderer stalks Sue-in, he's suddenly sliced in half by an invisible force. The man cut is Lee Kyung-chun, and he's not only got priors for violent crimes, he's also schizophrenic too. However, the detectives at the station are unclear exactly how he died. He's been cut clean in half, but given Sue-in was passed out at the time, they can't explain it. Things soon become stranger, though. Sue-in is actually okay, and her wounds have healed up into scars. She's been brought to the hospital, and when she awakens, she seems to be in full health. So what's happened to her? Well, it seems like this alien parasite has gone inside her, evidenced by flashes to Sue-in spasming on the ground that night. We then cut forward a few months later. A man named Seol Kang-woo is part of a gang called the Mangnanis and is tasked with killing the leader of the rival gang, Young Dong-po. He shows up at a club, brandishes a knife, and looks set to kill him. But the whole plan goes awry, and he's forced to flee. As a result of this botched operation, Kang-woo is forced to lay low. He ditches his cell phone and shows up back home, a house in a rural area. His sister Kyung-hee is acting really strange, while she says that their younger sister Jin-hee is around, but is intentionally vague about it. However, Kang-woo does find Jin-hee's phone in the top drawer of the dresser and a flyer on the mirror for something called the Sajin Church Revival Prayer Meeting. This is connected to everything, and the parasites appear to be forming some sort of cult together. We get confirmation of that not long after, as they lure an unsuspecting guy who hires an escort into an abandoned building. The parasites reveal themselves and look set to hurt him. However, armed guards suddenly burst into the warehouse and a big fight breaks out. These parasites are incredibly strong and throw filing cabinets across the hallway at the soldiers, but the guards are well trained and manage to subdue the aliens. As we soon learn, the parasites can also detect their own kin through their ears ringing, which is worth noting for what happens next. For now, the attack ends with the head of the operation surveying the damage. This is Choi Jun-kyung, and she realizes that the parasites are working together. She finds a locked door and has her subordinates break it open. Inside, they find body parts and a symbol for that church we've seen earlier in the episode. Meanwhile, Sue-in is back at work as usual. Her scars are healing up, and she's in contact with Detective Chulmin too, who happens to be the guy we saw earlier on investigating her case. Sue-in is also experiencing strangeness, thanks to that parasite. Her ears ring an alarm, and she starts to see the people around her in a different light. She's now on the radar for the parasites, who communicate with one another and corner her late at night. Kyung-hee is among them, and she confirmed that Sue-in is kin. She hands over a flyer for the church, telling her to come visit. Kang-woo happens to be listening to all of this, but unfortunately, Sue-in's parasite hears too and threatens him. The parasite forces him to play ball or suffer a painful death. When Sue-in awakens, Kang-woo explains how this larvae wormed inside her and spent its time patching up her wounds, meaning it couldn't eat her brain. Sue-in is basically two different people and a mutant. After telling her what the parasite wants, he heads back home. Sue-in heads home and writes in her diary, "Is there really someone else in my body?" And after losing 5 minutes in the blink of an eye, she awakens to find that the parasite has answered her. Yes, there is someone else, and the parasite needs to explain their condition in detail. Ask your questions, it says, and I will answer. Of course, this is very different to the anime, where little Migi is actually sentient and alongside our protagonist, but the diary will suffice for now. Now, this parasite can only take over her body for up to 15 minutes a day, and it will use that time to protect her no matter what. She needs to be careful though, because if her kin suspect she's a mutant, they will try to kill her. And she's also got a video of the parasite on her phone too to validate all of this. Meanwhile, a special task force from Seoul show up in town. They have scanners to test for parasite infestation, and security has been beefed up in the area too. Jun Kyung is not messing about, and perhaps it's only a matter of time before Suin is caught out. A special briefing takes place with a live subject and word of body snatchers. Jun Kyung is head of the task force to track them down and eradicate them. It would appear that the aliens all appeared at the same time, so given the scanners have reported back no parasites here, everyone is in the clear. This task force has been strictly controlling all information in regards to the parasitic organism, being sure that this doesn't leak to the media. They explain that these aliens have actually appeared all over the world, but we're only focusing on Korea for now. In order to kill these parasites, they need to destroy the heart completely, and a small pistol won't do the trick. Remember this, as it'll come in handy later in the series. The group need a big shotgun or a special knife to take them out. In order to test for people they suspect may be parasites, all they need to do is pluck a hair and it should disintegrate. Given Chulmin is in attendance, he starts to suspect Suin. To make things even more crazy, Jun Kyung's husband has actually been infected by the parasite. She's using him as a sort of sensor, given his super hearing, and keeping him alive to root out the place where the parasites are congregating. This explains how she managed to find the parasites in the apartment building. Jun Kyung is blinded by revenge, and that could well lead her on a collision course with Suin. Episode 2 of Parasite. The Gray begins with Kang Woo selling off a watch and pocketing the money from a pawnbroker. Across the road, he decides to spend some of his money to crack into his sister's phone, determined to find out whether she's left him a message. Speaking of hiding, Kang Woo is a wanted man, and those thugs from before, the Yongdongpo gang, have been searching around the area for him. Despite managing to crack into the phone and finding Jin Hee has called his friend Kiseok, Kang Woo is forced to stop this search and run. He's been spotted. Kang Woo manages to escape on a motorbike, though in a pretty chaotic action sequence. There's a lot of shaky cam here, though. Anyway, after these dizzying scenes, Kang Woo heads to the dock and speaks to his friend, Kyu-min. He points out about the Yongdongpo guys are serious, and they decide to meet at 9 to discuss things further. Kang Woo is also determined to try and find Jin Hee too, given what he's found out thus far. Meanwhile, Jun Kyung sets to work and is taken aback by one of the enthusiastic local officers approaching. This is Won Seok, and he's apparently a big fan of her work. He wants to be part of the task force, and she agrees to put in a good word to HQ for him if he helps to track down some of the parasites. She also signs his book for him. However, as the camera pans down to the workload on her desk, we see that Suin's case is one of those that she'll be looking into soon. Chulmin has a soft spot for this girl, and he decides to go see her while she's working. He's determined to find out the truth, and he plucks a hair from her at break. However, it doesn't disintegrate. Suin does get that strange ringing in her ears when a guy passes from afar, seemingly showing that he's one of the parasites. Before Chulmin leaves, he hands over a keyring to her. That night, Kang Woo's sister, Kyung Hee, shows and picks up Suin as they head to the church. The pastor wants to meet her given she can mimic humans, unaware that Suin is actually a mutant. They show at the Seijin church, but Kang Woo happens to be here too, and he watches from afar, filming this on his phone. When Kyu-min asks to meet, Kang Woo ignores him and moves in closer to take a look. What he finds are numerous dead bodies wrapped up in a shed just off to the side of the church. Unfortunately, one of the parasites show up and begins searching the place, forcing Kang Woo to move stealthily around and out of view. In doing so, he stumbles around and finds that his little sister is one of the people inside these bags. He's overcome with grief and struggles to control his sobs. While this is going on, we cut across to Soo-in in the church, who learns that the parasites arrived on Earth with one purpose: to control everyone and kill humanity. They play the victims, pointing out that they're being slaughtered and how Jun-kyung is using one of their own as a hunting dog. According to the pastor, the parasites aren't able to reproduce, and they need to do everything they can to ensure their own survival. The meeting is cut short, though, when Kang-woo, in his blinded rage, decides to kill the parasite in the shed. Unfortunately, this alerts all the others at the church, who head out and begin hunting him. There's a moment where Soo-in and the pastor lock eyes that seem to hint at some sort of showdown in the future, but I may be reading too much into this. As everything crescendos toward the end of the episode, the Yeongdungpo gang show up and grab Kang-woo in the woods. As they do so while trespassing on the parasite's ground, they're all killed by the aliens. Kang-woo escapes, and so too does Soo-in as she guides him away from the carnage. They manage to meet up with Kyu-min at the gas station, and they hurriedly drive off. Unfortunately, Kang-woo soon learns that Kyu-min is not actually his friend, and he's ratted him out to the rival gang to save his own skin. While driving, a knife fight ensues between them, until one of the parasites drops on the windshield and immediately attacks. Soo-in's parasite gets to work protecting them, and a fight breaks out on the road. At the same time, Kang-woo finds himself in the car, precariously resting on the edge of a cliff. Kyu-min is still alive, but he points out that Kang-woo has been set up by Jong-do, his former leader, and Kang-woo has to die. The whole operation was a suicide mission for Kang-woo, with him being used the whole time. When Kyu-min loses consciousness and dies, Kang-woo is saved at the last second by Soo-in, who kills her parasite brethren and returns to her normal state. At the same time, Jun-kyung looks over her desk and notices the file on Soo-in. She's closing in on her now. The Gray begins with us in the past. Jun-kyung forgets the receipt to her shopping and heads back inside the shop to pick it up. In her absence, her husband succumbs to the alien parasite, which infects him after dropping on the hood of their car. Jun-kyung's infected husband heads back into the shopping center and stalks through the aisles, causing chaos the entire way. People flee and scream, and when he faces Jun-kyung, he slashes down and cuts her ear off. Jun-kyung manages to get away, but not before saving a kid. In order to stop her husband, Jun-kyung traps him inside the storeroom. The grief, unfortunately, is too much, and she sleeps in the dark outside where she's trapped her partner, tears streaking her cheeks. Back in the present, Kang-woo and Soo-in are held up in a motel. Kang-woo believes they need to go to the authorities and reveal all about the Saiyajin Church. This is their best bet for salvation. Soo-in believes they can trust Chol-min, who happens to be the officer who arrested her dad for abuse in the past. Chol-min has a soft spot for her because he actually helped her get away from him. Kang-woo wants to keep fighting, given the fatalities he's suffered, and there's a moment where Soo-in looks at him and apologizes. Whether this is Soo-in or the parasite speaking, it opens up an interesting narrative here all the same. However, it's not explored in much detail, given the pair head to a phone box and ring Chol-min soon after, reporting the monsters to him. Chol-min speaks to Won-seok about the monsters and the church. He's reluctant to get Team Grey involved and decides he's going to handle it personally himself. He heads in to see Jun-kyung, but she brings up Soo-in and what's happening with her. Chol-min dissuades her concerns and mentions the church and the tip-off he's received. The entire task force sets up to attack, but when they show, they find the pantry of body parts, but the rest of the place cleared out. They do find the familiar symbol up on the walls, though, which is the symbol of this church, and of the parasites in general, while Chol-min discovers some keys on the ground. Unfortunately, the keys belong to Soo-in, given the familiar keyring he gave her. He decides to protect Soo-in and doesn't report this to Jun-kyung, despite her suspicions. Back at the station, the team are briefed on the situation involving the warehouse. It turns out there have been over 500 body parts in the warehouse, and they can suss that a large number of parasites were meeting there. They do know that Kwon Hyuk-ju is the pastor, and decide this is a good enough lead to pursue for now. Chol-min is acting suspiciously and twitchy, though, after the keys, and Jun-kyung has figured that out. Meanwhile, the parasites receive word back about Kang-woo and also that one of their own has been killed. Unfortunately, we soon learn that Won-seok is actually part of the organization with these parasites and working for them. Hyukju hands over a knife made of strong material not dissimilar to their tentacles, and tells him that he needs to kill the hunting dog with this no matter what. In doing so, it'll look like one of the parasites has done it when it's actually the turncoat, Wonseok. Elsewhere, Chulmin rings Soo-in and asks to meet at Changsong Amusement Park in 30 minutes. When Chulmin leaves, Jun-kyung decides to follow and has a tail put on him. Our detective is obviously unaware of this, and he hands over Soo-in's keys when they meet, pointing out about the church. He wants her to tell the truth and asks if she's in danger. When Jun-kyung shows with the hunting dog, the sensor goes off and she bursts onto the scene. Kang-woo and Soo-in are forced to flee and hide out in the theme park while reinforcements show. Soo-in, being controlled by the parasite, takes out Jun-kyung and attempts to flee. But the soldiers surround her. Meanwhile, we see that Wonseok is also here, and he stays behind while the others race in. He stabs the hunting dog repeatedly and leaves him a bloody mess. Kang-woo, though, happens to be watching all of this transpire from afar and sees the traitor firsthand. Soo-in, though, passes out and Chulmin is desperate to get her some medical attention. The other officers refuse, though, keeping their guns trained on her and believe that she's a parasite. Jun-kyung shows up and grabs the gray helmet belonging to her now deceased husband, and, with blood staining the sides, puts it over Soo-in's head. Soo-in, powerless to stop this, is taken away with seemingly no way out. Parasite. The Grey Episode 4 begin with Jun-kyung blinded by rage as she tells all the officers around her that Soo-in is a parasite. However, they've done tests and Chulmin demands they tell the truth and reveal this to the whole police force. Team Grey then reluctantly reveal that Soo-in actually has no signs of a parasite inside her. Soo-in is currently in a coma and seemingly no harm to anyone. The authorities, however, decide they need to step up and are going to inform the public about what's happening with the parasites to gain some semblance of control. I mean, given how public these parasites have been at attacking humanity, it's a wonder that this isn't bigger news already. Anyway, I digress. Soo-in is going to be transferred to HQ so they can keep an eye on her and do a detailed and thorough study to see if she actually is parasite-free. The transfer operation will be led by none other than Jun-kyung. The officers at Namil are also told to cooperate fully with Team Grey, much to Chulmin's disdain. Meanwhile, we get our first look at Heidi, not Miggy, as she communicates with Soo-in inside her subconscious. She in the place her spirit dwells, and Heidi believes this is the perfect place to have a conversation, as they're not likely to have this opportunity again. Heidi shows Soo-in her old house from the past and the day her dad was reported to the police. She summoned the courage to live that day after being beaten, but everyone looked at her like a monster for reporting her own father. Soo-in was ostracized from society as a result, and that explains why she's so reserved and working at the store. Soo-in, alone, met with her birth mother, but unfortunately she likened Soo-in to a bug, and with her new family, essentially abandoned Soo-in on her own. This explains the money she hands over, and telling her never to show up again. Elsewhere, Chulmin is filled in on Kang-woo and how he's been used by the gangs as a pawn to do their dirty work. However, he's been causing trouble in the local area, so Chulmin decides to head out and meet him before he disappears again. Kang-woo is not happy and prepares to board a bus out of town. He's incredulous that there's no news about the parasite, but as he takes his seat, Chulmin shows and takes off with him. In the car, Kang-woo points out that Won-seok is the suspect who killed the hunting dog. Chulmin is shocked and wants to know the full story, and how he's wrapped up in this mess with Soo-in. He brings up Heidi's connection and how it protects her when things get hairy. Hearing all of this, Chulmin decides they need to bust Soo-in out of this. He also promises to protect him too. Kang-woo has a choice and chooses the cowardly option, deciding to walk away. Chulmin calls him a coward, scathingly recapping everything he's done in his life and how he needs to gain some courage and make a stand. It does the trick, and Chulmin gets his inside man. While this is going on, Won-seok rings the pastor and brings all the details up about the transfer and the task force. The transfer time is coming up and everything is geared for a dramatic confrontation. While the parasites move in, Chulmin tasks Kang-woo with breaking into the police station and disguising himself as one of the elite transfer crew. This coincides with an earlier scene we saw of Kang Woo infiltrating the task force, and now we have a lot more context over how that went down. Anyway, while Kang Woo is riding up top with Soo-in, who is still comatose, Won-seok and Chul-min happen to be driving together. There's a rather unnerving moment between the pair, where they discuss church and Chul-min knowingly turns to his friend and tells him he'd never go with him to the church. Unfortunately, the transfer goes wrong as there's an accident on the highway and the parasites begin attacking. Jun-kyung shows with the others and they begin fighting, but there are numerous parasites and they seem to be winning. The truck Soo-in is kept on comes to a stop partway up the highway when the parasites kill the drivers. Kang Woo takes the opportunity to exit out the back and grab the key to free Soo-in, but Jun-kyung gets involved and tries to fight. Kang Woo does come out on top though and frees Soo-in from her gray helmet and her comatose state. The situation with Heidi ends with the parasite giving Soo-in a pep talk, pointing out that she's never been alone. The pair take off together and Chul-min look over and sees Soo-in from afar. He and Won-seok follow. But there's a problem. Won-seok knows that his colleague has clocked him. Won-seok brings Chul-min to the hideout and points out that he goes to Saejin Church and he's sick of being pushed around. He's a traitor to humanity and believes they need to open the door and let them in. Unfortunately, when the pastor shows up, Chul-min doesn't hesitate to shoot him. In retaliation, the parasite slices Chul-min's head clean off. Soo-in shows up just in time to see the parasite infect Chul-min and turn him. A fight breaks out between the two, but it's a stalemate, especially as the pastor's parasite is now inside Chul-min. Kang Woo shows and manages to escape with Soo-in, but Chul-min is still very much alive and seemingly plots his next move. Parasite. The Grey Episode 5 jumps back in time and explores more of Kang Woo's history. His little sister, Jin-hee, looks up to Kang Woo and believes he's in Seoul helping her out. She rings Ki-seok for an update, but he hasn't heard from her brother. When she heads home, she finds the pastor and Kyung-hee outside. Jin-hee is adamant that she's going to get help for her big sister. This doesn't fly with her sibling, though, and her insistence ultimately ends up getting her killed. The last thing Jin-hee manages to do before she's killed is ring Kang Woo. Back in the present, Kang Woo rings Ki-seok and learns that he's hightailed it away to Jinyang. However, he agrees to give over his address and the passcode for him to come to and hide out. As for Soo-in, she's blinded by grief for the one person in her life that always looked out for her. With the Chul-min she knew dead, and the new one a parasite, she composes herself and heads out with Kang Woo. Meanwhile, the task force are twitchy after the botched operation on the highway. With no hunting dog to guide them to the parasites, they want to call off the big music festival and memorial about to take place for the mayor. The authorities certainly don't want to cancel anything, given how massive this is for him. After all, it could be the last time he runs and politics for these people always comes first. Won-seok speaks to Chul-min after the meeting and he confirms that Soo-in is a mutant. This is how she managed to avoid detection on the sensors. Chul-min knows that she's super strong and decides Soo-in needs to be taken out. Kyung-hee rings and the pair discuss this operation, but Chul-min believes he can deal with this himself. At Ki-seok's, Soo-in decides she's not going to flee. She's going to fight back, and now, as they turn on the TV, news spreads of the parasites. Kang Woo is taken aback as the authorities decide to actually make this public. Jun-kyung, meanwhile, finds the church the parasites are hiding out at. She has pictures snapped of the exterior and organizes for the place to be attacked and everyone inside killed. After arranging this, Soo-in rings that night and warns that Chul-min and Won-seok are both parasites. Jun-kyung points out that they've done full body scans to get clearance and they're both fine. But hang on a second. Didn't Jun-kyung capture Soo-in and do full tests to reveal she wasn't a parasite? And we learned 2 episodes ago that these scans are inconclusive? Anyway, Jun-kyung wants to meet, so Soo-in gives her an address and hangs up. As they gear up for this, Jang-woo sees the final message that Jin-hee was about to send with "Don't come home" written out but never sent, given she was killed. Kang Woo realizes what a fool he's been and decides he's going to fight after all. Soo-in shows up on the opposite rooftop to speak to Jun-kyung that night. Soo-in explains the symbiotic relationship between her and Heidi, and also what went down with Chul-min. Jun-kyung decides she wants Soo-in to come on board with them for the raid, which appears to be one big setup to kill the soldiers. But Soo-in decides to flee, especially when more guards show on the roof holding a helmet, wanting her to be their hunting dog. With Heidi in control, Soo-in jumps off the roof and hops into a car driven by Kang-woo, and they race off. On the road, Heidi explains that she's taken way too much control of Soo-in lately, and she's going to be dormant for the next 3 hours. No matter what happens, they cannot get entangled in any more risky situations. Kyung-hee shows up to see Ki-seok on the trail of his brother and Soo-in. Unfortunately, things take a bad turn when he rings Kang-woo, telling him to come home. Kyung-hee takes the phone and demands they turn around. Otherwise, Ki-seok will be decapitated in 15 minutes' time. The pair do just that, and Ki-seok ends up sacrificing himself to protect Kang-woo and Soo-in, who then hurriedly leave and disappear. So after all of that, Ki-seok dies anyway. Meanwhile, the raid goes ahead, but Jun-kyung certainly has her suspicions about Chul-min. She does cut some of Won-seok's hair in the elevator, but when it doesn't disintegrate, given he's a human as we know, she suspects this may not be the case. With the team moving in for the strike, Kang-woo and Soo-in ring one more time and warn that this is a trap and for her to stand down. Jun-kyung shrugs off the concerns and refuses, unaware she cut the hair from the wrong person. Chul-min is part of the task force, and they move in, killing all the parasites in the building. Chul-min actually kills his own parasitic brothers with a shotgun to the chest, while Kyung-hee manages to escape on a bus. She watches Chul-min in shock and realizes she's feeling betrayal. So what's the end goal here? Well, Soo-in and Kang-woo suss out that the parasite inside Chul-min has an ulterior motive. It intends to take control of someone higher up the chain of command. And, more specifically, the Namcheon mayor who's showing up. Parasite the Grey Episode 6 begins this finale with Won-seok in the past. He shows up to see Pastor Kwan and finds him sitting on his sofa whispering, "Tidal flats," and "Professor Yoon." He's killed his wife, and Won-seok finds himself at the mercy of this parasite. To save his own skin, Won-seok agrees to work with the parasites. The pastor explains that he wants to govern an entire human organization and become their leader, explaining Won-seok's involvement here. Back in the present, Chul-min gives a press conference and an update on the task force. He puts out a report to try and find and apprehend both Soo-in and Kyung-hee, who are both wanted men. He doesn't mention Kang-woo, though, who gets him and Soo-in some snacks before leaving. Kyung-hee rings Kang-woo and decides that they should meet. He's not sure it's a good idea, but when he passes the phone to Soo-in, she tentatively agrees that they should team up and form a loose coalition to take out Chul-min. While Heidi does not want to do this and unnecessarily risk their existence, Soo-in may comply. Kang-woo happens to be watching all of this take place and he loses his temper. He rushes out with a knife, but Kyung-hee stops him and throws him down on the floor. Now, she does this in full view of everyone else at this garden, but nobody bats an eyelid, especially when a family with a pram pass by a few seconds later. When things calm, Kang-woo points out the plan that Chul-min has, which includes going after the mayor. Things are tense and a tenuous alliance is formed for the time being. As for Jung-kyung, she finds out that the knife used on the hunting dog could have been fabricated to make it look like a parasite did it. As we know, it was. Jun-kyung receives orders from her superiors that they have intel on a new set of parasites over in Gangwon-do, and she's told to leave. With Team Grey out of town, Jun-kyung is concerned, especially as Chul-min and Won-seok are part of the security team providing assistance for the mayor's arrival, and this coincides with the plan to take him out. On the way out of town, Soo-in rings Jun-kyung, while in control as Heidi, and informs her about the music festival. She brings up that she's en route and going to kill Chul-min no matter what. And just like that, Jun-kyung decides to believe her and turns the van around, ditching this plan and believing Soo-in and Kang-woo. Meanwhile, Kyung-hee and Soo-in wait for the opportune time to strike. Eventually, Soo-in gets a tip-off when Chul-min shows, and Kang-woo also gets visual on him. Chul-min isn't exactly stealthy, and he immediately starts killing people, showing that he's a parasite, and moving in to attack the mayor. In the chaos, Chul-min manages to infect one of the mayor's guards, but just before hitting the killing blow and taking control of the mayor, Kyung-hee arrives to save the day. Kang-woo protects the mayor while a fight breaks out between the two parasites. Unfortunately, the pastor's parasite is too strong and takes control of Kyung-hee from the inside, killing her outright. Before it disappears, it takes control of Won-seok. Kang-woo and the mayor escape, while Soo-in and Won-seok fight. However, mid-skirmish, Won-seok offers them to team up and take out the organization. Jun-kyung shows and makes a big decision. She notices that Won-seok is one of the parasites and shoots him in the chest, killing him outright. As for Soo-in, she manages to kill the stray parasite that sneaks up on Jun-kyung from behind, impaling it and killing the creature. Heidi reveals to Jun-kyung that Soo-in is trusting despite what's happened to her in the past and decides to leave her fate in the officer's hands. She passes out on the floor, as Jun-kyung and her subordinates show. Jun-kyung decides that Soo-in is just a normal woman and the parasite is of no threat, so she lets her go free. Meanwhile, Kang-woo and Soo-in form a bond after everything they've been through. We cut forward with them sometime later, and it's clear that he likens her to Jin-hee, given he looked out for his sister for so long. As they walk together, Kang-woo explains that he's recently joined a new organization. Specifically, he's joined Team Grey with Jun-kyung. Given he has a military background with the Marines, it makes sense that he would use this as a way of getting his life back in order. As they stand together, Kang-woo brings out a note that Heidi wrote to her. She wanted him to speak to her, but he's not able to finish the letter. Just before he leaves, he points out that there's space on the team for her too. Soo-in reads the rest of the note to herself, where Heidi has told her, whether she likes it or not, she's not alone. We then cut to the Grey. Soo-in has a visitor who's apparently an expert in all matters of parasites. The Japanese man stands and turns to reveal that he's Shinichi. He holds out his hand to shake hers, and the first season comes to a close. If you're watching this channel for the first time, hit the subscribe button and watch other episodes. Until then, it's me, Mitsubishi, signing off.